The night was quiet in the small countryside town, where fields stretched endlessly beneath the stars. But inside the old wooden farmhouse at the edge of town, a young mother named Emily sat at her kitchen table, staring at a stack of overdue bills. Her hands were rough from working the land, her face pale with exhaustion, but her eyes, sharp, unyielding, almost haunting, told the story of a woman who had seen more than most could imagine. To her neighbors, she was just a quiet single mom raising her little boy and tending a struggling farm. What they didn't know was that Emily had once served as one of the U.S. Army's most elite snipers in the Green Berets. She had traded combat zones for cornfields and missions for motherhood. All she wanted now was peace. But peace, as fate would have it, was about to be shattered. Trouble began slowly, just whispers and laughter from the local bullies who had too much time and too little respect. The town's group of reckless young men, led by a spoiled rich kid named Travis, had decided Emily's farm was an easy target. They mocked her for being alone, spread rumors about her, and vandalized her property. At first, she ignored them. She had survived wars, she told herself, she could survive petty harassment. But then it escalated. They spray-painted cruel words on her barn, threw rocks through her windows, and one night, slashed the tires of her old pickup truck. Emily's little boy, Daniel, just 7 years old, asked in a trembling voice, "Mom, are the bad men going to hurt us?" That question cut deeper than any wound she had ever endured on the battlefield. Emily realized that the line had been crossed. This was no longer just about her farm, this was about protecting her child. Her challenges grew heavier each day. She didn't have the money to replace what was damaged. The sheriff in town shrugged it off as kids being kids, dismissing her complaints. Friends she thought she could rely on turned silent, afraid to stand up against the wealthy families backing Travis. Isolation wrapped around her like a storm cloud, but Emily had been trained for moments like this. She understood fear, how it could paralyze the weak or sharpen the strong. She decided it was time to stop running from her past. If these bullies wanted a fight, they had picked the wrong woman. One evening, when the bullies returned to trespass on her land, Emily waited. She had spent the day setting up quiet defenses around her property, lessons she had carried from the battlefield now reborn on the farm. She reinforced doors, set up floodlights, and even dug shallow trenches at the edge of her fields. She didn't want to harm anyone, but she wanted to send a message they would never forget. As the group of young men stumbled into her property laughing, they suddenly found themselves blinded by blinding lights and tripping over hidden wires. A shadow moved with precision among them. Emily stepped out, her posture calm, her voice steady as steel. The moon hung low over the valley, casting silver light on the endless fields of wheat and corn. The quiet hum of crickets filled the night, and in the old farmhouse at the edge of town, Emily sat with her son, Daniel, at the dinner table. Their meal was simple, just bread, soup, and a few vegetables pulled fresh from the garden. To anyone else, it was meager. But to them, it was survival. Emily had given up so much to raise her son here, on the same land her late husband once dreamed of turning into a thriving farm. What nobody in town knew was that Emily wasn't just another struggling single mother, she was a former Green Beret sniper, a woman who had endured combat missions most soldiers would never survive. But Emily didn't wear her past on her sleeve. She kept her head down, spoke little, and hoped the world would let her and her boy live in peace. That peace didn't last. At first, it was little things. Stray trash dumped near her fence, boys throwing eggs at her barn, laughter echoing in the night. Emily ignored it, convincing herself it was nothing. But the harassment grew worse. The group responsible was led by Travis, a wealthy landowner's son who thought he owned the town. His friends followed him blindly, enjoying the chaos they left behind. They saw Emily as an easy target, a quiet woman with no husband, no family nearby, and no one to stand up for her. They didn't realize they were poking a sleeping giant. The breaking point came one afternoon when Daniel returned from school in tears. His backpack had been ripped open, his notebooks thrown into the mud by Travis and his gang. "They said we don't belong here," he sobbed. Emily pulled him close, her heart aching. She had faced enemies with rifles aimed at her chest, but nothing compared to seeing her little boy in pain. That night, as Daniel slept, she sat by the window staring into the dark fields, memories of her military days flashing through her mind, the training, the discipline, the endless nights of survival. She had buried that part of herself, but now she realized she needed to bring it back. Not for war. Not for revenge. But for protection. The next few days, Emily prepared quietly. She worked her farm by day, but by night, she reawakened her old instincts. She mapped her land like a battlefield, noting every weak point and blind spot. She set up motion-triggered floodlights, reinforced her doors, and even dug shallow trenches near her property line. Her movements were precise, efficient, almost surgical. Her son noticed the change. "Mom, why are you doing all this?" he asked. She knelt beside him, placing a firm hand on his shoulder. "Because no one will ever hurt you again," she promised. The confrontation finally came on a stormy night. Thunder rumbled, rain poured, and Travis and his gang arrived in pickup trucks, headlights blazing. They shouted cruel taunts, revved their engines, and charged onto her land. But this time, Emily was ready. The moment their tires hit her,